This reading is taken from Mark chapter 6, verse 1 to 13. Jesus is rejected at Nazareth. Jesus left that place and went back to his hometown, followed by his disciples. On the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue. Many people were there, and when they heard him, they were all amazed. "Where did he get all this?" they asked. "What wisdom is this that has been given him? How does he perform miracles? Isn't he the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, Joseph, Judas and Simon? Aren't his sisters living here?" And so they rejected him. Jesus said to them, "Prophets are respected everywhere except in their own hometown and by their relatives and family." He was not able to perform any miracles there, except that he placed his hands on a few sick people and healed them. He was greatly surprised because the people did not have faith. Then Jesus went to the villages round there, teaching the people. He called the 12 disciples together and sent them out 2 by 2. He gave them authority over the evil spirits and ordered them, "Don't take anything with you on your journey except a stick. No bread, no beggar's bag, no money in your pockets. Wear sandals, but don't carry an extra shirt." He also said, "Wherever you are welcomed, stay in the house until you leave that place. If you come to a town where people do not welcome you or will not listen to you, leave it and shake the dust off your feet. That will be a warning to them." And so they went out and preached that people should turn away from their sins. They drove out many demons and rubbed olive oil on many sick people and healed them. This is the word of the Lord.
I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Whether it was in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And I know that this man, whether in the body or apart from the body, I do not know, but God knows, was caught up to paradise and heard inexpressible things, things that no one is permitted to tell. I will boast about a man like that. But I will not boast about myself, except about my weaknesses. Even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool, because I would be speaking the truth. But I refrain, so no one will think more of me than is warranted by what I do or say, or because of these surpassingly great revelations. Therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan, to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. And that is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong.
This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Good morning. Our topic today for our 2 readings, one from Mark and one from Corinthians, is just hanging on in there, really. I think it's particularly apposite now, at a time when many of us are feeling tired and wearied by the whole situation with COVID, by many people who are having had to work flat out through the whole thing and are exhausted, and just everyone with questions and probably doubts, and as I say, just feeling a bit exhausted and wondering what to do. And so our readings today, I think, reflect on something about persevering even when it seems unlikely. And I hope will give us heart for the times we are in now and ahead. So we get to quite gloomy and difficult readings, really, to begin with. Here we see Jesus, on the one hand, returning to his hometown and really being disparaged and dismissed at the beginning. And then we see Paul struggling with this issue. We don't know what this thorn is that he's suffering with, but we know that it's difficult and that he has asked God to take it away, and God hasn't answered. However, there is much to be positive about in both these readings, I think. So let's go back to Mark and let's look at the crowd. I think I was reading a commentary on this passage, and often, we think about and we focus, don't we, on the kind of very human thing of Jesus being rejected by his own family. And we perhaps don't think much about the crowd. And this particular commentator said the crowd that Jesus surveys is remarkable for being passive, for being patient, for being present. They're simply in the house with him. For being patient, for being present, they're simply with him. And I think there's a real important message for us when we feel perhaps, too sort of ground down even to pray or to do anything active. Actually just dwelling with God, just abiding, just being present with Jesus is really important. And I think this passage is quite unsettling, isn't it? It's unsettling if you want to kind of control and define Jesus, which is what his family and his religious scholars do. But the crowd here are just listening. And Mark is also highlighting here welcoming and belonging. There's lots of drama, but there's also a sense of welcoming and belonging. And that's very important for us to hear too, I think, in these difficult times. And remember that Jesus also never walked away from his disciples, even though they demonstrate a kind of lack of faith several times, and they get things wrong, and they're so kind of faithless and dull in spirit, particularly in Mark's gospel, really. And neither does Jesus give up when the miracles don't come easily. Though I love in this passage that kind of casual thing that he was unable to do very much, except a couple of healings, so there's still miracles. He was not able to perform any miracles, except that he placed his hands on a few sick people and healed them. Well, that would be pretty good, wouldn't it? That, in our context, feels like a result. And so even at difficult times, he doesn't give up. And then he begins to promise revelation. And he guarantees that he'll meet those who fled for him after his resurrection. That comes later on in Mark. He just asks that we follow. And I think that is probably a really important message for us now. If we're just not feeling energized, if we're not feeling like being sent out like the disciples and being active and doing stuff, then that's okay if we just spend some time where we're literally just being passive, like the crowd here. I think it's fine as long as you don't do it forever. But that belonging, that sticking around, that just saying to Jesus, I'm just going to sit and be with you and listen to you, that's really important too. So don't feel bad if you read the bit about the 12 disciples being sent out 2 by 2, and some people are greatly energized by that and inspired and feeling all missional, and that's wonderful. If you're in that place, then feel encouraged. I'm not saying don't do that, because there are great results from that, which we'll get to in a minute. But it's also okay just sometimes to just sit and be and to absorb what Jesus has for us, and that he always has good things. So even in what must have been personally and humanly the most difficult of settings for him here, he still is healing people. He's healing sick people. He has always that vision for caring for us and helping us and looking after us. So if for a while all you can do is just belong, that's fine. So be encouraged either way. But if you are feeling prompted, if not now, but later on, to go out and be missional as Jesus sends his disciples out, remember not to go on your own, that Jesus always sends people at least in pairs, and there's good reason for that, all sorts of good reasons. And here he's saying, don't take anything with you, no bread, no beggar's bag, no money, wear sandals, but don't carry an extra shirt. And the idea perhaps is that this could be quite a long journey for them, but they won't be staying in any one place for too long. But if you skip to the end, it says, so they went out and preached that people should turn away from their sins. They drove out many demons and rubbed olive oil on many sick people and healed them. So how encouraging is that? Even out of this really difficult situation comes miracles for Jesus. That's not surprising at all, is it? But miracles for the disciples that he sent out to. So again, remember that important instruction about leaving something if it's not working. That's effectively what Jesus is doing here. He's saying it's not going to work here. I'm not going to bother. But even so, he still heals people. But he gives the same instruction to his followers, doesn't he? If people aren't welcoming you or listening to you, then just leave it. Shake the dust off your feet and then carry on somewhere else. But we see the great results that the disciples have. They drove out many demons, they rubbed olive oil on many sick people and healed them. So that's marvelous. And I think we also need to hear that. I don't think that was just a message for them. I know some people do. They think, miracles don't happen now, or we're not expected to heal people. But I think we are. And not all the time, and not every person. So like I say, there is an important message here about listening to God for what's the right thing for you to do right now. And sometimes that is dwelling and listening, a bit like Mary and Martha reading. And sometimes it's being active and being sent out like the disciples here. So we each need to listen to God and to think, what is he saying to us? And then if we go to the Paul reading, again, there's challenges in here, aren't there, about, well, what happens to our callings, to our faith, to our walk with other believers when God doesn't grant our prayer requests or he appears not to? And we've had great wisdom on this from Wendy, haven't we, about how God answers our prayers, but not always in the way that we would want. And we see that. And it's challenging and difficult. And yet again, Paul doesn't give up. He, again, stays in there. He hangs in there in that sacred space. And even though he has asked God repeatedly to take away whatever this thorn in the flesh is, it's certainly challenging and it's certainly difficult. And he's prayed, if you notice, 3 times, and I think that's quite significant, because in Mark's Gospel, in the Garden of Gethsemane, Mark 14, 32 to 42, Jesus prays 3 times, and he too is overruled. God seems to say no. And so perhaps we learn from that in our prayer life and in our walk with God, there are just some afflictions that we have to live with and we have to endure. But in them, and again, we've learned a lot about this from Wendy, in them, we will experience God's grace. Deliverance is not just positive and instant, although it can be, as we've seen in these other examples in Mark. But God's presence with us in our suffering is the answer we most need sometimes. It's important to keep us grounded, to keep us aware of our dependency on God. God's grace is always available, even perhaps especially in times like this of great difficulty for the world. And we mustn't forget that. And so I think that message that comes sort of is underlying both readings about abiding, about sitting with God, about listening to God, about being in his presence, about trusting Jesus all the time, even when we can't get the answers that we want, and listening out for what it is that he wants us to do. And just to reiterate again, that overall, God is a God of great love and compassion and grace. And sometimes it is in these seasons of difficulty, or when we seem to come up against a a blockage in our lives that we really want God to clear. And that can be all sorts of things. Sometimes it's physical affliction. Sometimes it's just things not working out the way we would like them to at the time. We need to trust God always. And we need to stay belonging. We mustn't cut ourselves off. We need to stay in kinship. We need to stick around. That's very important. And I think that's something that comes across very strongly in both our readings today. And that's when we will experience God's amazing grace and compassion. And hopefully that will build us up enough that when the time comes that perhaps God does call us into some more dramatic missional ministry, then, like the disciples, we will have great success and reward in that too. But however low we are feeling, however difficult things seem, then if we abide in God's love and we wait patiently, even if for a while it's passive, then God will reward us. We will hear and feel his love and compassion, and he will use us when the time is right. We just need to keep listening. Be patient, be present, be in, metaphorically, the house with God. So whether that means coming to church, for some people, it might be that. It is important to have fellowship with one another if we can. And so I would encourage you, if you haven't been coming, do try to make the effort to come. There is something really profound and important about being in sacred places and about worshipping together. But if you can't, again, just make sure that you have space, if you like, at home to make sacred space and to dwell and to abide with Jesus. That is what will be our saving grace. And if we spread the word about God's compassion, it will save the world too. Amen.